Over the last century, universal suffrage expanded, bringing millions of new nodes into the political process. Yet, as the franchise grew, actual policy control decoupled from the voting public. A 2014 multivariate analysis by Gillens and Page mapped decades of policy outcomes against public opinion. It shows that when average citizen preferences diverge from economic elites, the elites prevail. Elites possess substantial impact on policy, while average citizens have statistically near-zero independent influence. The Gillens and Page data suggests the modern state functions as a mechanism optimized for economic elite outcomes, rendering majoritarian democracy a statistical fiction. Sociologist Colin Crouch defined this environment as post-democracy. Formal institutions like elections, a free press, and parliaments continue to run their legacy scripts, but they function as a theatrical user interface. They provide the aesthetic of popular rule, while masking the migration of actual power. Decisions have migrated into closed-loop networks of corporate oligopolies and technocratic managers. These entities execute wealth extraction and formulate policy entirely beyond the ballot box. The political grid operates as a thermodynamic extraction engine, functioning according to its design. To navigate it, we must decompile its core mechanics. This outcome is the result of the economic laws governing human behavior. Public choice theory applies microeconomic principles to the political process, stripping away romantic assumptions. Joseph Schumpeter defined politicians as vote entrepreneurs, corporate managers dealing in the currency of votes to secure market share within the state. This marketplace relies on a specific calculation by the voting base, rational ignorance. Spending hundreds of hours researching trade policy is a waste of biological bandwidth when a single vote has a statistically 0% chance of altering the outcome. Voters respond by defaulting to the user interface of virtue, simple slogans, tribal colors, and emotional media programming. A rationally ignorant, emotionally manipulated electorate provides the fuel for the vote entrepreneur's engine. If the majority is rationally ignorant, the legislative machine is driven by those heavily incentivized to coordinate. Economist Menker Olson mapped this dynamic through the logic of collective action. Large, diffuse majorities suffer from the free rider problem. The benefits of a broad public good, like lower national debt, are spread so thin that no individual has financial incentive to spend their time or money lobbying for it. Distributory coalitions, such as special interest groups and corporate cartels, operate on the opposite math. These concentrating minorities face minimal organizational costs and stand to gain localized financial payouts by capturing state policy. The cost of their plunder is hidden by dispersing the financial burden across millions of taxpayers. Because the individual harm is negligible, the majority never organizes a counteroffensive. The democratic structure facilitates the institutionalized dominance of the organized minority over the disorganized majority. When the masses attempt to organize a grassroots movement, they hit the hardware of the human operating system. Robert Mitchell studied early socialist parties explicitly engineered for equality, yet he discovered they inevitably functioned as rigid hierarchies. He termed this the iron law of oligarchy, and his verdict was absolute. Who says organization, says oligarchy. As any network scales in complexity, delegating authority becomes a technical necessity. The base mass lacks bandwidth to manage daily operations, birthing a specialized leadership caste. This administrative layer monopolizes internal communications and the treasury, securing permanent root access to the organization. In every instance, egalitarian software is overwritten by hierarchical hardware. Modern political parties demonstrate this law through the cartel party framework. These organizations have severed their roots from civil society, relying instead on state subventions to survive. Rival parties operate as a cartel, colluding to preserve their shared institutional monopoly and lock out competitors. When an outsider successfully breaches this cartel and wins an election, the system triggers its automated defense. This is the assimilation protocol. The disruptor is forced to utilize the elite's existing bureaucratic hardware to govern. High-level salaries and corporate networking rapidly upgrade their socioeconomic status, severing their psychological tether to the working class. While the system updates its user interface to manage public unrest, the back-end source code remains intact. This theoretical rot is visible in the physical architecture of the state. Carl Schmitt argued that the Enlightenment ideal of the parliament, a forum where rational discussion yields political truth, has been destroyed by mass democracy. Legislative floors function as theatrical stages. They exist to rubber stamp the corporate negotiations and cartel agreements already finalized in the shadows. This structural isolation matches Christopher Lasch's diagnosis, the revolt of the elites. The managerial elites have seceded into private enclaves, insulating their lives from the thermodynamic consequences of the macrogrid. They dominate the instruments of cultural production, while remaining detached from the general populace. From this perspective, the public are not fellow citizens, but a demographic to be managed and farmed. This diagnostic often triggers psychological panic in those programmed with a savior complex to fix the system. The system functions as a highly optimized extraction engine. It is not a broken machine in need of repair. It is a fixed environmental constraint. The sovereign response is the weather framework. You do not hold a democratic vote to change the trajectory of a storm. You accept it as a kinetic constraint, secure your perimeter, and insulate your assets. Withdrawing emotional bandwidth from the macro-political casino allows for the reallocation of energy into building tangible reality. Refusing to play the cartel's game is the only mathematical way to win. Democracy doesn't exist, and the sovereign couldn't care less.